This is an excerpt. It's excerpted from one of my hour-long modules in the series called The Western Mystery Tradition, Medieval and Modern, that's found on the wisdomseminars.org site. That series consists of many modules. This is excerpted from the 7th module entitled The Hermetic Renaissance. The education in the Western mystery tradition is essential for bishops of the home temple. It's part of the requirements for training, episcopal training, and they begin with the study of the ancient initiatic mystery schools of classical antiquity, such as the Eleusinian mysteries and the Delphic oracle and so on, and they learn about them up to modern times. It's a very long and interesting study. Many other things are required as well. This I'm putting up for people to see because it shows you some of the very interesting things about the use of Pythagorean and Hermetic allegory among the medieval painters. So images like this were made that had inscribed into them. You couldn't tell. It just looks like somebody's in the middle and somebody's standing in a seashell, you know, because she's Aphrodite, and and so on. And here are zephyrs and winds blowing and so on. But in fact, embedded into this are not only astrological symbolism that will bless a home or bless the place that it goes into, but other kinds of talismanic imagery that are, for example, Pythagorean harmonia, Pythagorean harmony, which we're going to talk about in just a second. So you can bring these things through proportion, direction, mythological function, and mathematical position by images of elemental forces, forces of nature, that confer these powers, because as above, so below. So here are elemental forces, zephyrs, winds, that south winds that confer fecundity and things that are positive, the increase and the growth of spring and so on. Now this is perhaps one of the most esoteric Hermetic images ever made, the image of Primavera. This is what it looks like, a bunch of people standing around holding your arms in funny positions and stuff like that, but built into it, if you're an art critic or if you are an art historian, you know what's in these because you've read the descriptions of them written at the time and what they're supposed to be. We have to understand first, to understand Primavera, we have to understand the Hermetic Pythagorean concept of the harmony of the spheres. Now, this is a nice diagram to use. What's all this? Well, up at the top we have Apollo. We have Thalia, who represents prosperity. And now we have a bunch of interesting names of nymph-type creatures here associated with names that have to do with the modes of music, Mixolydian and Phrygian and so on, associated with planets. And so what is this all representing? What's going on here? This is one representation of the unity of things, how the harmony of the spheres, how this all relates. It was the imagery of the Renaissance was not just biblical; it was steeped in Greek mythology and biblical legend altogether. If you read Shakespeare, you have to know Greek mythology to understand what he's talking about. So it's a synthesis of both the Greek and the Christian. Here we have celestial spheres coordinated with the 9 muses of Greek mythology. Now these are the 9 muses, Calliope and so on. For example, Euterpe is attributed to Jupiter. Here's Euterpe. Here's Jupiter. Apollo, which is the sun, is the deity of prophecy. as he was in the in Greece. The priests of Apollo took over what was originally an oracle of Gaia, and it became known as the oracle at Delphi. And Apollo was associated with music and prophecy, and so he's associated still this way. So he sits on a throne up here. He's the sun, and he represents also the Holy Spirit. Thalia up the top and at the bottom represents the idea of prospering. So the way this is drawn is to show prosperity, is to create prosperity. It's a talisman to create prosperity through Hermetic Pythagorean harmonia. Now the mother of the Corybantes, who was an ecstatic female, these were the female devotees of Dionysius, is Thalia, and she was also the representation of prosperity. And then the musical modes themselves are connected to the 7 planets and the 8 zodiacal spheres on the right over here, like the Dorian and so on. And the poetic meters are all connected to the muses on the left. These are all meters of poetry. So all this is a way of, if you're going to write a poem, you're going to know, you're not going to just make something rhyme or something. The meter that you write it in, even the day you compose it on, and the hour that you choose to read it for the first time, and all kinds of things are going to be related, and they all have to be understood. This is the principle of the harmony of the spheres, that all things are connected in this kind. So, I'm going to quote to you from a scholar named Dempsey's his critical essay called "The Portrayal of Love" about the Primavera and humanist culture at that time. And so I'm going to make one little note before we go into this, that the scale that we use of music, the tempered scale, da 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 da, is not mathematically pure by Pythagorean rules. In all musical scales, whether they're Chinese or Hindu or and European, 1 octave is a bit less than double the math of the other one. For example, if you have an A440, we don't have A880 as our next octave. We have like A875 or something. It's a little flat. And that was something that people were well aware of. Pythagoras worked with strings and precise measurements of proportions. And he found that, if you wanted to make an instrument that sounded good to human ears, you had to make it the way we all do. You put in stops in a certain place, but the octaves are not perfect. The octaves are imperfect. They go a little flat as you go up. In THG, when we do an attunement before our Wesak initiation, we use perfect Pythagorean octaves on the attunement tape, so it sounds like it gets going sharper and sharper as we go up, and it kind of grinds and grates away at you. But in fact, that's because we're subjecting ourselves to perfection, which you don't do too well when you stand in front of a burning bush too long, the sort of thing. So this is the thing I wanted to note. Now here's what Dempsey tells us about this. He says that the Pythagoreans proposed that for evolutionary or intelligent octaves to have a fully harmonious ring to them, in other words, for them to be correct. Can you fix that door, because it's just banging.
What do you want me to do?
Well, so it's not going to go slamming shut, just maybe close it would be okay, or just put the chair in the way. It's necessary to exceed the bounds of ordinary practical music and actually introduce additional concentrations of resonance at the points of vibrational retardation between the notes mi to fa and ti to do. In other words, we're going to have to actually raise the pitch a little bit in order to make it work. So these additionally, he calls them concentrations of resonances or metaphysical semitones, will be created in time by the individual himself. Now, if you have a painting like Primavera that can help you do that, then in a way that seems proportional and harmonious, that's even better. So the 7-tone octave of practical music reflects a natural cosmic process which is in fact disharmonious. Without the 2 additional semitones that you have to put into it to goose it up to make it a full octave, it's
it's not possible for a developing scale of intelligent resonance to exactly double its rate of vibrations. You can't have an octave, a musical octave goes from 440 to 880, and therefore square its possibilities, because mathematically when you do that, you square its possibilities. So in lacking the aforementioned semitones, the natural living octave must given time either decompose, which the Pythagoreans called something would involve, or be deflected or consumed by other more powerful orders of energy and form passing through its given sphere of influence. And so we have a vast multiplicity of natural forms existing in the universe, and there are no apparent straight lines in nature, etc. So here's what the here's what the people that were very steeped and versed in this sort of thing did. They made a painting that would correct this. It would give us the correct harmony of the spheres. It would give us the correct harmony of the octave, but they do it in a visual. So here's PRIMAVERA. This is, these are the characters we have: Zephyr, Chorus, and Flora, Venus, representing pleasure, chastity, beauty, and Mercury is over here. Well, here's what it would do naturally, left by itself. It needs a semitone here, it needs a semitone here, or it's going to degrade. It's going to go back into the natural form. We want it to go form a straight line for a perfect octave, but we're talking about it as a visual thing here, graphic thing. So we're going to, in order to create this, we're going to introduce graphically a semitone here and a semitone there. And that is how the painting was corrected and made. Now, this is not somebody's later interpretation. This is the intention of the artist, and this is what you will read documents about and papers and diaries about, etc. So basically, the painting as it was made, where people are positioned and why one is positioned higher than another and so on, and why their heads are positioned in positions they are in, is to create that particular thing. Here's a semitone here. This is what is done with that semitone here and so on, to create the perfected octave, so to speak. So these were complex Hermetic compositions. They used, as I say, Kabbalistic horary astrology and magical sigils that made medicines and talismans and other magical devices, and Hermetic painters were the Renaissance equivalent of the Greek sculptors who created dynamic images of the gods to make contact with their energies in worship. And that's why they were not just people who could make pretty pictures. They were people who were technicians of the sacred, so to speak. So this is what was going on during the time of the Hermetic Renaissance. Very profound stuff.